In my Moranifesto, as you would expect, it's the usual blend of what I do. I talk too quickly, I talk too fast, there are multiple references to my vagina and Benedict Cumberbatch, but underneath that is the central belief that people need to take over politics again. I loved it when Russell Brand started talking about politics and 12 million people watched him online on Newsnight talking about how he could change the world. And then when he put his book out, I was kind of expecting a big to-do list of how he would change the world, but there weren't really any suggestions at all. It was just kind of like, vibes. And as a practical woman, I'm like, no, I'd like a to-do list. Maybe I should write my own. And so that is what I've done. My Moranifesto is my manifesto, point by point, for how I would change the world. The idea behind it is that the thing that I noticed with Russell Brand is that people felt they could talk about politics again, particularly online, and whole sections of people who just kind of go, no, politics is boring, or politics is not for me, or I don't feel qualified to talk about politics, which is what I felt even though I worked for the Times, because I'm a scruffy girl from Wolverhampton who was brought up on a council estate and didn't go to the right schools. I'm not one of the men in suits that knows the history of the Whig government in 1715, so I thought I wasn't allowed to talk about politics. And then finally I just grew some lady balls and went, no, it's just simply about common sense. I can talk about politics and I want other people to as well. So I've written the funniest, most accessible manifesto that I can, and now I'm asking people to write their manifestos as well, because my true belief is that everybody's got just one idea, however tiny, that could change the world a little bit for the better. One of the key things about the book is I've written about how important social media is for the future of politics. Previously, we used to discuss politics in the pub. That was where the working classes would go and talk about the revolution. But now so many pubs have been closed, and the only ones that are left are playing very loud doof, doof, doof music and selling very overpriced cocktails. You can't sit down and talk about a revolution. So talk about politics has moved on to social media. But unfortunately, the general tone on social media is used very snarky and very cynical. And if you come on as some kind of wide-eyed utopian mooncalf kind of going, things could be better, that's seen as a foolish thing. The thing is with that is the stats are generally on the side of the moon-eyed utopians. We put a man on the moon. You know, we went from apartheid South Africa to Nelson Mandela ruling South Africa. We have equal marriage. We invented David Bowie. So usually the utopians win. But you wouldn't think that if you were reading about politics on social media, where anybody, as soon as they suggest something progressive, it's just crushed by people just going, well, that's not realistic. Well, I've seen the power of social media before and how it can change things. Obviously, one of my specialty areas is feminism. I write about feminism, and also as a woman, I need feminism, or else it might go back to a time where I'd be burnt as a witch. And I saw the way that feminism just took off there 5 years ago. And what was key to me watching that is it was, again, girls who weren't professional feminists. They weren't professionally political. It was just women with keyboards talking to people on the internet and changing legislation in this country. Nimco Ali, for instance, who runs the Daughter of Eve campaign in Bristol, she's just a girl with huge hair who started campaigning about FGM. She ended up on the front cover of the Times and changed legislation in this country on female genital mutilation. And that at that point, you were just like, you can do that. This is if you're going to talk about progress, I think we've sort of become, we've started to believe in this thing where just one perfect politician is going to come along and solve everything, like the politics Jesus. That will never happen. The future never turns up one day and changes everything overnight. It's all about incremental progression. And what you do is you go, progress is, it's like a patchwork quilt. You go, this is a thing I could do. I could campaign about FGM. I could talk about changing working conditions. We could talk about 0 hours contract. I'll do that little bit there, and other people will do their little bit there. And we gradually sew these all together and bring it together. And that's how we make the future. And that's what social media is so key. And everybody going, oh, what's the bit I could do? It's a to-do list. What's the bit I could do? And that's why I wrote the book. I guess the key books in my life, we were a very poor family, and when I was 13 I realised that we would have to earn money, and the reason that I knew that I could be a writer and write a book, which is what I did when I was 13, is because that's what Jo March does in Little Women when she needs to earn some money, and that's what Mother does in The Railway Children when she needs to earn some money. It was literally, that's what girls do. It's the one thing you can do if you're poor. You don't need any resources apart from some paper and a pen and your brain. So that was how I knew how to be a writer. So books told me I could be a writer. And then reading The Female Eunuch at the age of 13. I'd mainly bought it because the cover had a picture of some breasts on it, and I thought there might be some pornography in it because I'd just discovered masturbation, and that was a hobby that I wanted to take further. And instead of finding pornography, I found feminism instead, which was arguably of more use to me. And then, recently books that I found very useful, because I'm trying to encourage people to think about forming new political parties, and you would have to find a new way of making people work together, because as we can see in the main political parties, so much bitchy infighting just ruins parties. And Gillian Tett's recent book, The Silo Effect, talks about the ways in that Facebook and Google have become massive global forces, and they have a completely different managerial system and a way of interacting with people to any other companies on earth, and that's why they're so powerful. So I'm sitting there taking notes going, maybe at some point in the next year I will form a political party and I will base it on these practices. Female characters in fiction are a tricky one because, you know, I didn't realise, but all the books that I was reading that I was naturally gravitated to when I was a child and a teenager were ones with women in it. You know, it was Jane Eyre, it was Gone with the Wind, What Katie Did, Anne of Green Gables. You know, they're all girls who are you know, come from the odd, unusually headstrong, often quite odd girls in reduced circumstances who just believe that things will get better and triumph over it. But you know, I found time and time again that kind of like those were basically the only good role models that I could find or that I liked in literature, because so often the story of a headstrong girl in literature is that something really bad will happen to her. And I'm really interested in not seeing girls suffering. This whole idea that part of being a woman is to suffer something, you know, and to be beaten by the world and to triumph over it. I'm like, I'd like to see some girls who don't do that. I like it when Toad of Toad Hall just basically gets to drive his car around going pop, pop, and never suffers any consequences. I want to see girls like that. Narrating the audiobook of How to Be a Woman was one of the most unexpectedly traumatic instances in my life, because I'd written the book in such a hurry. I wrote it in 5 months because of the deadlines that we had. I never even read it back. Then it was published, and then a month after it was published, I went in to read the audiobook, and it was the first time I'd read it. And, you know, I was just turning these pages going, I'm describing me masturbating. That is so rude. I'm a very frank woman, and frankly, I think I should not have been allowed to write this. I was constantly shocked by what I'd written. I was like, was I on glue? Why would I have said this? No good woman would have said this. So yeah, every night I'd just come home and go, I'm a bad person. The brilliant thing about audiobooks is that, like, it means that you can multitask, you know, particularly if you're a woman. Like, if you've got an audiobook on, it means that you can just be getting on with something else. You know, whenever I listen to the radio or audiobooks, I'm just usually gardening, which is a really lovely thing to be able to be planting things and listening to something at the same time. So audiobooks means that you can multitask. The writing process for me is as soon as my children leave home, I sit down at a desk, and then I try and smoke as many cigarettes and spend as much time on Twitter as I can in between writing some words. Sometimes the cigarettes and Twitter win out, some days the words win out. But the key thing about being a writer isn't that it's intellectually painful at all, but it just makes your bum hurt. You spend so much time on your bum. Next for me, it's a busy year. We start writing the third series of the TV show Raised by Wolves. We've got 2 films going off at the moment. We're adapting the novel How to Be a Girl, Build a Girl into a film, and we've got another big action movie as well about this brilliant girl that we found in the 17th century that we fell in love with. I'm writing the next book, 2 columns a week on the Times, and hopefully trying to give up smoking. That's not going to